بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم This is chapter 6, verses 108 to 9. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا أَشْرَكُوا وَمَا جَعَلْنَاكَ عَلَيْهِمْ حَفِيظًا وَمَا أَنْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِوَكِيلٍ وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيُسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَّا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُمْ ثُمَّ إِلَى رَبِّهِمْ مَرْجِعُهُمْ فَيُنَبِّئُهُم بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. And if Allah had pleased, they would not have set up others with him. This is referring to idols. If God had wanted to, he wouldn't have let people set up idols. And we have not appointed you as a guardian over them, as a keeper over them. And you haven't been placed in charge of them. and abuse not those whom they call upon besides Allah. Or in other words, and abuse not the idols, lest exceeding the limits, they abuse Allah through ignorance. Thus to every people we have made their deeds fair seeming. Then to their Lord is their return. So he will inform them of what they did. And the next one is وَقَدْ نَزَّلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ أَنْ إِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ يُكْفَرُ بِهَا وَيُسْتَهْزَأُ بِهَا فَلَا تَقْعُدُوا مَعَهُمْ حَتَّى يَخُوضُوا فِي حَدِيثٍ غَيْرِهِ إِنَّكُمْ إِذًا مِثْلُهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ جَامِعُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ وَالْكَافِرِينَ فِي جَهَنَّمَ جَمِيعًا. And indeed, he has revealed to you in the book that when you hear Allah's messages disbelieved in and mocked at, sit not with those people. Sit not with them until they enter into some other discussion. For them, indeed, you would be like them. Surely, Allah will gather together the hypocrites and the disbelievers all in hell. I have recited these verses and chosen blasphemy or punishment of blasphemy as today's topic because these few weeks Muslims and Islam are getting a much worse press than the bad press they get normally. And there are two reasons for this. There is a public inquiry going on into the bombing of a concert some years ago, but also the heinous crime committed in Paris when a school teacher's head was cut off for apparent blasphemy. And the New York Times reported on this, saying, France on Monday unleashed a broad crackdown on Muslims accused of extremism, carrying out dozens of raids, vowing to shut down aid groups and threatening to expel foreigners as anger swept the country following the decapitation of a middle school teacher for showing caricatures of Prophet Muhammad in class. Many of those swept up in raids are already in police files for showing signals of potential radicalization, like preaching radicalized sermons or sharing hate messages on social networks, government officials said. More than 200 others, the bulk already in prison, were threatened with mass expulsion. But other groups targeted in raids, including Muslim associations, previously given government subsidies for their work, promoting better civic relations, and only 15 of the people arrested had any connection to the gruesome attack on Friday. The Spectator in the UK reported there's already talk of growing fear in France, not among the students and teachers, afraid of discussing contentious subjects surrounding Islam, but the fear is of rise in Islamophobia. This reaction perhaps explains why, in a world that continues to conflate Muslims and Islam, the ominous threats posed to the dissenting Muslims who blaspheme continue to be ignored. Now, and some years ago, similar thing happened in Austria, and the Austrian government then banned any translation of the Holy Quran that it did not approve of. You see, when you take a step, you should have a purpose in mind. When you go out and get into a train or a car, or you just go to the station and get into any train and say, oh, let's see where it takes me. Or do you have a purpose in mind? I want to get to town X, and I want to get there at the cheapest fare and as quickly as possible. Okay, now let me find a train. Which train is it? This train leaving at this time costs more. But if I delay it for half an hour, I can get a train which is much cheaper. And so on. I'm using this as an example. So if our purpose is that we defend the honor of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, how has that purpose been achieved by this killing, by the bombing? I think it was in Manchester. How? Has Islam and the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam come into disrepute, or Muslims are now held in higher esteem? One question is, if these countries are so awful, why are you here? From all over the world, from all over the Muslim world, these people have allowed you into their country. And the Holy Quran says, if someone does a good deed, you do a good deed in return. Why do you go around making mischief in the land, as the Holy Quran put it? I have just recited 2 verses of the Holy Quran to you. If Allah had wanted to, no one would have been able to make idols that people worship to. And then he says to the Holy Prophet Muhammad, I haven't put you in charge. It's not your job. It's my job. God says, if you abuse their idols, they will abuse Allah. And God says, to every people have we made their deeds fair seeming. But when they come back to me, I will then tell them what they did. It's not for you to decide. And in the next verse, when you hear Allah's messages being disbelieved and mocked and ridiculed, don't sit with such people. That's what I'm saying. If France is so bad, the Holy Quran says, don't live there. Go back to your own country. Another Muslim boy, a few weeks ago, again hurt someone with a knife or something. And his brother was in France, and he left his home country and went to France. Why? Because the standard of living in his country was lower than the standard of living in France. He could get a job and send money home so that his whole family had a better standard of living. Didn't you know that these people were Roman Catholics? The blasphemy law itself is strange. Can you imagine a Muslim committing blasphemy? You can't. A Muslim would not do that. If there is such a law, and there are such laws, you will use them, you will misuse them against those Muslims with whom you disagree. And blasphemy laws are misused in Pakistan against Shias, against Ahmadis, and so on. No Muslim will even imagine, even think of the thought of saying something against the dignity of our beloved Prophet, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, cannot enter into a Muslim's head. But then, look at the non-Muslim. Just by being a non-Muslim, he is committing blasphemy because he is saying that I do not accept the Holy Prophet Muhammad's claim to be a prophet. This is why he's a non-Muslim. This is why he's a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or whatever. So that means that you're going to kill all non-Muslims who live in a country where Muslims are in a majority, because their very life, their very being is blasphemy. If that is so, why did Allah give these instructions? When you hear Allah's messages disbelieved and mocked, listen to the words, disbelieved, that's one thing, and mocked. Sit not with them, go away until they start talking about something else. If you sit with them, indeed you will be like them, because what would you do? You would start abusing their beliefs and gods. And then we are told that some hadiths are quoted. Yes, hadiths do talk about the Holy Prophet ordering some people to be killed. But remember, the Holy Prophet passed away in the year 632 of the Christian era. And the first hadith was not written until nearly 100 years after the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Sahih Bukhari, which is regarded as the most authentic book of the sayings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, Imam Bukhari, Rahmatullah alayh, he died in 870, 225 years after the Holy Prophet Muhammad passed away. Imam Bukhari died. And he wrote his collection of a hadith 150 or 170 years after the Holy Prophet died. And around the same time, later than Bukhari, Imam Muslim did the same thing. But that is one thing. This is recording history. And if you look at a hadith, it says, so-and-so told so-and-so, who told so-and-so, who told so-and-so, who told so-and-so, who said that the Holy Prophet Muhammad said this. There's a whole chain of narrators. If you went into a court of law in the UK and you were giving evidence, and I said, Nasir told me, and Nasir said, Rifat told me, and Rifat said, Ifat told me, and Ifat said, Mudassir told me. The judge will say, well, that's very interesting. But did anyone tell you directly? But then let's look at it another way. When the Holy Prophet Muhammad was in Mecca, although Muslims were persecuted, he was himself, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, himself was persecuted and abused and mocked and so on. He took no action against any of these people. Once the Holy Prophet Muhammad and Muslims established themselves in Medina and Islam began to spread, that they found they were under attack. The Holy Prophet was constantly sending out troops to keep an eye on the movement of various people, to make sure Medina was secure. Now, if under these circumstances some people were killed, then that is during a war. Let me give you an example. You might say, well, it was an open warfare and so on. Well, let's take an example. There was a war between Germany and the UK, and Churchill tried to have the German Chancellor murdered. Why was that okay? Why was that okay? Well, you'll say, okay, Hitler started the war and this and that and so on and so forth. Yeah, fine. Okay, explain to me why Americans bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The people that they killed had nothing to do with the war. There were women and children and old men and babies. Had they started the war? Were they taking part in the war? But Americans killed hundreds of thousands of them. They did it once, and then they did it again, making the point that unless Japan lays down its arms, they'll continue to kill innocent women and children. I don't see any critique of that. The Holy Prophet, let's assume the hadith is true. The Holy Prophet finds someone who's trying to rally non-believers against Muslims, and he orders that man's execution. Now, the argument that Americans use, that we had those hundreds of thousands of Japanese killed to save American lives, why can't the same argument be used for the Holy Prophet Muhammad? That he had one man executed. For what reason? To save the lives of many, many Muslims and non-Muslims at the same time. Because if he gathered together this army and they'd come and they'd attack the Muslims, then non-Muslims would have been killed as well. Why isn't that argument valid for the Holy Prophet Muhammad? You'll say, well, that's war. Okay, that is war. Britain and United States were not at war with Libya. Yet, Americans' fighter planes and bombers flew from British bases and they bombed Colonel Gaddafi's presidential palace to try and kill him. And they killed his son. Gaddafi was out. Why is that justified? Gaddafi wasn't at war with Britain or United States. Were President Reagan and Margaret Thatcher charged with crimes against humanity or killing of a baby? Did they apologize? No. Why is it that it's okay for the West to do everything that is in their interest, to protect their interest? But if the Holy Prophet Muhammad does exactly the same thing to protect the interest of Muslims, suddenly long articles are written about that. But then, Muslims are at fault as well because they don't know how to plead their case. When these cartoons were first published, why did we just ignore it? One unknown newspaper somewhere in Scandinavia publishes these cartoons and no one knows about it. Until a fatwa is issued from there and someone makes a speech from somewhere else. And what happened? What happened? All the newspapers on the continent, they said, okay, on this date, we are all going to publish these articles, try and stop us. What did you achieve? I go back to where I started. When you take a step, you have a purpose in mind. I'm going downstairs because I'm hungry and I want some food. I'm going to the train station because I want to go somewhere and I need to take a train. You don't just aimlessly wander about. There is no punishment for blasphemy in Islam itself. It's all based on interpretations of jurists who came later. If they can say that there is punishment, I'm also entitled to say no, there is not. For the reason, the two verses that I recited of the Holy Quran. Quran allows killing for murder and insurrection, when you rebel against the government and you kill people. And a gentleman called Sadaqat Qadri, he has written on this and he writes that the actual prosecutions even for blasphemy in the Muslim historical record are vanishingly infrequent. They're becoming frequent now, but presumably Muslims of the olden days weren't as sincere or dedicated Muslims as these people who want to go around and kill people. They don't pray 5 times a day. They don't give zakat. They lie and cheat to get asylum in Western countries. But when does their sense of honor suddenly wake up? When you lie and cheat to get asylum in a Western country, aren't you blaspheming against the Holy Prophet Muhammad, who said never lie and never cheat? Or against the Holy Quran? Or when you claim government benefits while you're working as a taxi driver or something for cash in hand, isn't that blasphemy? Na'udhu, what impression do judges and magistrates form when you present it in court to say you have done this? Anyway, Qadri writes, one of the few known cases in Islamic history. We talk about historical evidence here. One of the few known cases, he says, was that of a Christian accused of insulting Prophet Muhammad. It ended in his acquittal. What year was that? 1293 of the Christian year. Although it was followed by protests, etc. But the point is, the court acquitted the man. Now listen to the words: a vanishingly infrequent. It is sad that we do more harm to Islam in the name of protecting it or protecting the honor of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we don't even realize how much harm we are doing. I end by this incident. Abu Sufyan, who persecuted and tortured and abused our beloved Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 1 year, there was drought. There were no rains in Mecca. And people began to suffer. He went to Medina and asked the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallam to pray for rain for people of Mecca. The Holy Prophet did not have him arrested. The Holy Prophet did not have him flogged. The Holy Prophet did not have him executed. The Holy Prophet did not refuse to say prayers for the people of Mecca, who persecuted him so much that he had to migrate from Mecca to Medina. Instead, he raised his hands and asked the Muslims present to join him in praise to Allah to send rain for the people of Mecca. You want to honor the Prophet? Follow that example. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil Azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun kareemun malikun barrufun rahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma ansur man nasara dina Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa ja'alna. Allahumma khzul man khazala dina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa la taj'alna minhum. Ibadallah rahmakumullah, inna Allaha ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i zil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'izukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Uzkurullaha yazkurkum wad'uhu yastajib lakum wa zikrullahi akbar wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, qad qamatis salah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin.
Amin.
Inna a'tainakal kautsar fasalli li rabbika wanhar. Inna syani'aka huwal abtar. Allahu Akbar. Sallallahu liman hamidah.
Rabbana lakal hamd.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Iza jaa nasrullahi wal fath wa ra'aitan nasa yadkhuluna fi dinillahi afwaja. Fasabbih bihamdi rabbika wastaghfirhu innahu kana tawwaba. Allahu Akbar. Sami'allahu liman hamidah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Thank you for joining us for our Friday service. I just want to remind you that coronavirus is rapidly spreading again in many countries of the world. In England, most of England is under severe restrictions. Wales is closed. Northern Ireland is closed. Scotland is under severe instructions. It's also increasing rapidly in Pakistan and France and so on. So please, the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib, he said that although we should try all material resources at our disposal, we should never forget that everything happens by God's command. So we should pray to him as well. Pray to him to keep the whole of humanity safe and sound and free from harm, regardless of their religion or sect or nationality or color or creed or caste or anything else. And pray that humanity may soon find some kind of an antidote to it and learns its lessons of not destroying God's creation, which is leading to these problems. Assalamu alaikum. Khuda Hafiz. Goodbye.